So thanks for joining. Session today, why good IT measures may not be the silver bullet. Quite a scary headline, obviously designed to grab your attention, which hopefully it has done, but it's not here to bash IT. You'll see as we go forward. Quick introduction to myself. Dean Conway, as we've mentioned. I'm the divisional cyber lead for Ardonna. Ardonna is the parent of Target, Ethos, and Bravo brands, etc. And my role is to support our brokers, our colleagues, in their discussions with you about cyber risks and cyber insurance. I've been in commercial insurance for 16 years, including cyber, but cyber focused since 2023. Helping the group move forward. A few qualifications under my belt as well, more to follow. Agenda for the morning, cyber facts and figures, really strong, paint a big picture, helps you understand the risk you face. What is cyber insurance? Let's have a look at it. What is it? What does it do? So looking at the key cover areas of a good policy. Who needs cyber insurance? Common claims and causes of those claims. And some myth busting towards the end. So we're going to look at some frequent sort of myths or frequent beliefs that clients have about their business and how they are protected and how that might not be quite correct. And all of these points will talk to why good IT on its own isn't going to be enough to protect your business. The IT teams, whether it's in-house or external, they're all fighting a losing battle. And insurance doesn't replace your IT. It is there to support your IT, give them access to resources if something goes wrong so that they can move forward as swiftly and as efficiently as possible, ensuring your business can recover. So cyber facts and figures. Really scary, as I said. First one, 350,000 new malicious programs discovered every day. That's a terrifying number. It's a lot of malicious programs for your IT people and systems to defend themselves against. A lot of them will be caught by your, hopefully, up-to-date anti-malware program. But some of them are called zero-day vulnerabilities. Zero-day being the amount of notice the software developers have had to create a security solution, a fix. So those zero-day vulnerabilities are unknown and can't be protected against until they are realized. But by that point, the criminals are already using them to get into your systems. 3.4 billion phishing emails sent globally every day. Again, a terrifying number. We don't get that many emails every day. So our spam filters are doing a good job for the most part. What it does mean is the ones that do get through are really convincing and hard to spot. So there's much more chance of an employee clicking on a link, downloading a file, which ultimately results in your network being compromised, leading to data loss or ransomware attacks being put onto your system. Human error, when we look at claims data, will contribute to about 95% of all data breach events. So it was 90% on a KnowBe4 report a couple of years ago. Mimecast only in the last couple of weeks have released a new report showing it's now 95%. So the criminals, they know they can lean on the people. The people are the weakest link in the IT security chain, and they are using that to their advantage. People will make mistakes, whether they are untrained, unaware, overworked, tired, complacent. It's one of those things. Some of these things are hard to spot, so we need a plan in place to recover. About 76% of attacks generally begin with phishing, so that follows the volume of human error. So the phishing attacks are that initial way in, that email that looks to be genuine with a link in it or an attachment that allows the criminals access to your system if somebody clicks on it. If a system is breached, we've had demonstrations from insurers that show your files can be encrypted at a rate of 50,000 a minute. So you've got to have a think about how many records you have on your systems. If you've got 50,000 or less, 1 minute could be all it takes to encrypt your entire system. So it's very scary. And what this shows is that you need resources and a plan before it goes wrong so that you can hope to recover from such a situation. If we ignore the criminal risk at the moment, we've got to think about Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, the government body or the regulatory body that enforces GDPR and data protection regulations. If you, as a business, you collect data, you're what's known as a data controller under GDPR. You're collecting this data. If you mismanage it, you don't store it safely, or it gets leaked, or gets out into the wide web, the ICO can come and knock on your door and carry out an investigation. If you are found negligent in your actions, you've not done enough to protect the data, or you don't have a plan to deal with data loss, they can look to fine you. And currently, it's up to 4% of your annual turnover, or £17.5 million, whichever is the higher number. So a really significant risk to a business, even ignoring the criminal aspect. This is just regulatory risk from data you collect. The average ransomware cost in the UK for 2022 was £210,000. So a really significant sum of money, especially when we consider that 84% of ransomware victims are hit twice. And that's before they've fully recovered or within that 12-month period. Why does this happen? What we've got to understand is that when these criminals are successful in getting into a business or getting a ransom paid or taking some data, they go on to the dark web, which is the criminal internet, and they brag about it. I got into this business and I managed to get, a £200,000 ransom paid, or I collected X gigabytes or terabytes of data, which has value to these criminals. That then puts a target on your back as a business for these other criminals to have a go. Because if Mr. Criminal next door can do it, I can certainly do it because I'm much better than that criminal. So they're going to test your systems again to see if they can get in and get a ransom or some data. And at the bottom there, the average downtime following a ransomware attack sits between 21 and 24 days. So really, really scary as a period of potential downtime. If you can imagine your business ground to a halt for even just 21 days, what would that look like to you? What would be the financial implication? How would you trade if you couldn't access data or systems? Who would you need to speak to? Do you have the money available to you to pay for external support? The answers are potentially not. So all of these points here talk to why good IT is not the silver bullet. It's far more risk than good IT can protect you against as a business. So what is cyber insurance? That is what I'm here to talk about in part. It's what we can offer to you in support of these risks. It's protection for your intangible assets, so the things you can't touch as a business. So we look at your bricks and your mortar for your commercial combined or shop and office insurances, but the intangible assets that we can't touch is what cyber insurance is there for, and to help through the consequences of those assets being damaged, unavailable, misused, or needing to be restored or recreated following a cyber event. So what are intangible assets, you ask me? I can hear you. It's your client data and your business records, your processing systems, planning and resource management systems, email and cloud storage account, and accounting systems and online banking. Those are the main ones. So if you can imagine every interaction you have with technology or data on a day-to-day basis, that's pretty much going to fall under that heading of intangible assets. So who am I speaking to? How do I get their contact information? How do I produce letters or emails? Where am I going today? Who am I meeting with? It could be manufacturing, what's being made today, what's being shipped out or received. How do I put an order through for new stock, replacement stock? It's all digitalized these days. Not many businesses are still operating with paper and pen. And I think the last point here is reputation. So you've got to think about your business's reputation as an asset. So you have hopefully a nice loyal client base that you rely upon repeat custom potentially. If you suffer a cyber event, you're going to be required to contact those individuals and tell them, we've suffered a data breach, your data's got out, you can't trust us anymore, potentially, is the message that they will receive. So yeah, you're going to have to manage a cyber event very, very well and efficiently to keep those customers happy and on side. So cyber event, what's a cyber event then? We've talked about intangible assets, but what is a cyber event? It's quite a wide-ranging thing. A definition of a cyber event can be generalized in two broad categories. So first one being actual, suspected or alleged, unauthorized disclosure, loss or theft of information that you hold as a business caused by unauthorized access to your computer system, accidental disclosure, so sending a spreadsheet to the wrong person potentially with some other person's data on it, or deliberate or reckless action of a rogue employee. Before I move on to the second point, I'm just going to highlight that suspected. The reason it's bold and underlined is because insurance is there to help you and help your IT people realize or assess whether you are suffering a cyber event. So it's help immediately. Insurers want you to contact early and often if you think something's going wrong, so we can rule it out. We talked about 50,000 files a minute being encrypted. Quicker we can get onto it and realize if it is a real event or not, the better we can deal with it, and hopefully the less impact it will have. So that's the first broad definition of a cyber event in a wording. Second one is actual suspected again, or alleged unauthorized access to, modification of your computer system or usage of your computer system, such as the introduction of malware, including a virus or ransomware program, a denial of service attack, or a social engineering attack. We'll go through those in a bit more detail later on. So that's a broad understanding or overview of how wordings, insurance policies define a cyber event. So this is what would happen. You could then call and say, I need to look at making a claim potentially. So how cyber insurance works to support your IT. So we're not replacing them, we are trying to support them. So this is following a suspected cyber event. The first and most crucial part of the insurance policy is access 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to a response team. So you can call up and say, we think something's going wrong, can you help us? And they will give you that crucial, immediate and expert advice, which again can support your IT person, whether that's in-house or external. At that point, the response team will look to help you contain it. If we identify something is going wrong, the response team will take action or tell you or your IT person what action to take to contain the situation. The faster we can do it, the better. We're going to link in to specialist legal advisors. We need to understand if you have any legal obligations from that point. And that could be to notify the ICO, the regulator. You have 72 hours to notify the regulator if there is a data breach event. So the legal advisors will tell you that and start that clock for you, potentially helping you through the process. Then we're going to look at following up with an investigation for you. So alongside your IT, the cyber forensics team will be put forward and they will investigate the matter fully for you. So what's happened? How did it happen? How did they move around? Has anything been taken? Has anything been left behind on your systems? And then the last part of the insurance response is to resolve it. And the financial resources given to you or providing you with expert resources prepaid to reinstate and recreate those data records, looking at your loss of income. So if you've got a business interruption claim, so you've not been able to trade for 21 days or 24 days or longer, we look at covering that loss of profit. And after everything's resolved and the systems are built back up, potentially, depending on which policy you've purchased, you may have a pot of money to do a full system assessment and to look at remaining risks that can be taken advantage of in future, or potentially to make improvements. They may give you a fund to implement some new technology to be a safer business from cyber risks. So looking at key first-party covers here. So I think it's good we understand what a good insurance policy could give you and how that ties in to your IT solution overall. So there's three categories: first-party covers, which is you, the policyholder, and we are protecting you as the first party. There are third-party covers, so covers that look to protect your clients, your suppliers, your customers, from cyber risks on your system, in your end. And then crime covers, so the external threat of criminals doing harm or damage to your systems. But key first-party covers, incident response and breach response. We've talked about this. The provision of, so providing you with or paying for cybersecurity advice and forensics teams for that initial assessment and to contain the situation. That helps your IT team in stopping it getting worse. Then the legal and regulatory, so providing those specialist legal teams in cyber and data risks to look at legal obligations, draft those documents and notifications to customers, and help with regulatory reviews with the ICO or the PCI payment card industry potentially. Security and forensics investigations. So again, providing specialists for that follow-up review of the risk. What happened? How did it happen? How do we fix it? Business interruption, you hopefully will be familiar with from commercial combined, shop or office insurance. It's reimbursing that lost profit you've had caused by the cyber event and potentially paying for increased cost of working, ICOW, to pay for things like overtime or outsourcing if that will help you minimize your loss or the impact to your business. Dependent business interruption is slightly different. This is a cover that, particularly since COVID, most businesses should be looking to have. We've started to outsource IT, cloud storage, the software we use to produce documents and letters, and our client relationship systems where we store their name, address, and key contact details. That's generally now outsourced to third parties. That presents a risk to you as well as a business. It's out of your control. And those third parties, those supply chain partners, they can potentially suffer an unforeseen outage or a cyber attack of their own, which ultimately, if they go down, means that you, as an innocent, unaffected party from the attack, can't trade. So you're going to need to have dependent business interruption to cover your loss of profit or increased cost of working during that period of outage on the supply chain partner's side. So no fault of your own, nothing your IT person can do about it. A third-party system has gone offline that you are dependent on. And damage or loss of data and software. So it's the cost to reinstate and repair those data files. So your IT team or external or internal may be able to do that. It's just going to take a lot of time and potentially money to reinstate all of the data records and check they are working and are clean from any malware risk following an attack. So insurance is there to pick up that cost. It's a financial safety net to you, your business, and your IT team. Breach notification costs and privacy breach notification costs. So we've got to write to affected individuals following a data breach event. So if you hold data on, let's say even 10,000 individuals, we've got to look backwards. You collect 1,000 every year. You've been collecting data for 10 years. That's a lot of data on your systems. And if worst case scenario, all of it is taken off your system by a criminal, you're going to have to write to those 10,000 people and say, really sorry, we've lost your data, and this is what we're doing about it. And if you can imagine you're suffering through a cyber attack, and all of a sudden you've got 2,000-3,000 people trying to call you, that's quite impactful to your business. So we're going to look at setting up a call center as well. Insurance can look at setting up a call center to divert those calls elsewhere for you. And that helps you essentially focus on recovering from the attack, the cyber event, whilst the customers are still getting the information they want from a dedicated call center. Credit and ID monitoring costs. So this follows the notification. So if we have lost personally identifiable information about living individuals, these third parties, GDPR says we have to, as data controllers, provide credit monitoring and ID monitoring services to those people for 12 months. And that's quite costly to you as a business, especially if you've got upwards of 10,000 individuals to provide that service to. I think the last number I heard was $14 per individual. So it very quickly ramps up if you've got a large volume of clients or data on your systems about living individuals. And hardware replacement costs, I think, is the last one we've got for key first-party covers. What you've got to understand is that if you get a particularly nasty piece of malware on your system or a bad virus on your system, it can damage laptops and servers beyond repair. They can be overheated or damaged beyond economical repair. And you're going to need to buy new computers, new servers, new laptops, new tablets, potentially. Your commercial combined insurance, your shop, your office insurance won't cover this. If you have a look at the policies, they will generally have a blanket exclusion for cyber risks, which means you need dedicated cyber insurance if you want to have protection for that cost of replacing hardware if you do get a nasty piece of malware or a virus. Moving on to key third-party covers. So there's fewer of these because we are looking to protect you as a business first and foremost, but you have third-party risks and third-party responsibilities. So the first one is network security liability. So this is your legal liability to others following those accusations of transmitting a virus or malware to their system. If you emailed a virus to them, or you failed to secure your system, or you've lost their data or even lost employee personal data leading to ID theft. You can be sued for that. Privacy breach defense or privacy breach liability. Again, legal liability to others following a cyber event that results in disclosure of personally identifiable information, payment card information, or protected health information. Very, very important if you're in the care industry, obviously, for those reasons of collecting quite sensitive personal data about health matters. Damages, the result of a failure to warn or notify individuals. So we don't get a communication out in time about the breach. You can be sued for that by these third parties. You need some protection in place. Or damages the result of unauthorized access to data held. So if you hold data about contracts or patents or tenders that aren't public knowledge, mergers or acquisitions, that's all quite valuable data. And if it gets out early, certainly if it gets into the hands of criminals, the owner of that data who's trusted it with you may look to seek damages as well. Moving on to crime cover. So crime or e-crime within a cyber insurance policy is the most key area, I believe. So we need the first party covers, but crime is where we see the most frequent claims triggers, if you will. So ransom and extortion payments is the biggest impact event we see. So this is where you've had an attack from a criminal, they've encrypted your system, or they've taken your data and they are putting a blackmail extortion demand forward to say, pay us, usually in cryptocurrency, X hundred thousands of pounds, and we will release it back to you, or we won't share it on the dark web. This is cover to reimburse that cost. So if you have to make a payment, if there's no way around it, it's going to be significant. Insurance will look to recover or reimburse that cost to you. Funds transfer fraud is the most frequent thing we see. Very sadly, it leans on that human error risk. So, as I said, humans are the weakest link in the chain. It's the people in your businesses that will make mistakes that ultimately cost you downtime or financial loss. I haven't included it here, but there was a report that came out recently that suggested 80% of the data breach situations businesses find themselves in are caused by just 8% of your staff. So it's the people that we focus in on, because we can find those select few, whether they're maybe not tech savvy, they're overworked, they're distracted, they will click on something ultimately, and it's how we go about dealing with that that will help you through. So yeah, funds transfer fraud is a pot of money for you as the first party, as the policy holder, to reimburse any payments made to criminals unintentionally, where they've slipped through a fake invoice where it looks like a customer or a supplier and it's been paid, or where they've got access to your system and taken money out of your bank account directly. We also look to cover things like CEO or Friday fraud. We call it Friday fraud because it usually happens late on a Friday, and I'll go into some more detail about that a bit later on. And the smishing and vishing scams, so the voice phone calls where it's a criminal pretending to be usually from your bank, or the vishing, the smishing scams, which is the SMS text message we get from Royal Mail. You've not paid your postage, click here, or Amazon missed delivery, click here to redirect. People fall for this all the time, unfortunately, and that's why criminals still use it to this day. And just to send a note through there, we've covered off first party, third party, and crime covers there. That's only a limited overview of the covers that are available. It's quite a detailed, comprehensive policy when you get a good cyber policy. No two policies are the same, sadly. So if you've got any questions or you want to look at buying cyber insurance, go to a trusted, knowledgeable broker. They can help you through that process and identify differences. So potential proactive insurance benefits. We noted that on the flyer. We're going to talk about a few proactive benefits potentially available. This talks to how a good insurance policy can help your IT in making you a safer business, adding layers of protection. So some insurance policies do offer proactive benefits, and that can include what we call port sniffing, if you'll forgive the phrase, also known as vulnerability scanning. So this is an external view of your online presence to see if we can identify vulnerabilities in your systems from the outside, to say, do you know what? If I was a criminal, I can see I could get into your business through that open port, or that piece of software that appears to be out of date or obsolete. Dark web monitoring is potentially provided as well. So this is keeping an eye on that dark web, on those bragging forums for your business data being leaked. So usernames and passwords up for sale, where we can say, Mr. or Mrs. Client, we've identified your data has been leaked. You need to take X, Y, and Z action. So that's something your IT team potentially could receive directly as a notification, so they can take immediate action. Giving you access to knowledge libraries, which will allow you to educate yourselves, your C-suites, your staff. Sometimes we get access to e-learning modules, which will help you in showing your employees what a phishing email is, how to spot it, how to avoid it, what to do if you click on something, as well as looking at password strength and password security. And access to advice lines outside of a claim for legal matters, GDPR matters, cybersecurity matters, where you or your IT person could potentially ask questions. We are thinking about implementing multi-factor authentication. Is that good? Is that bad? How might we do that? What systems do we need it on? You can get that advice through the advice lines. And self-assessment tools potentially available as well. So your IT team can use that as a template to say, where are we at on our cybersecurity journey? What more could we do to be better protected? And it will help you through that process with a yes or no. We currently have X, we don't have Y, and you can build a picture potentially for next year's IT budget as to what you should focus your efforts on. So who needs cyber insurance? Certainly, people on the phone call are interested. That's great. And the short answer is all businesses need cyber insurance. I would very confidently say 99.9% of businesses I interact with have cyber or cyber crime exposure. We do appreciate, as trusted insurance advisors, that some businesses will suffer heavier consequences, or they have a bigger risk of a cyber event happening. So we try to identify those by looking at certain triggers, such as businesses relying heavily on IT systems, online services, or websites to conduct their business, holding sensitive customer or employee details, such as banking information or medical information, which is pretty much all businesses. They hold commercially sensitive information, as I said, patents, mergers, acquisitions. If you're processing sensitive accounts data for other parties, architects even about future plans. Or you process regular payments or payment card information as a matter of course. So obvious ones are retailers. But one of the biggest impacted industries is actually construction. Construction collects and process quite significant sums of money on a fairly regular basis. And usually on a 14 or a 30-day account, potentially. So once the money's been sent to a criminal, we don't find out about it for 14 or 30 days, and it's far too late to do anything about it then. Take a second. If any of these bullet points sound like your business, then yes, we should be having a conversation about cyber insurance. I make a point here to say that SME businesses are actually particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks because usually lesser IT budgets, systems are lacking in sophistication and resources when compared to corporate businesses. And these criminals, these threat actors, are looking for the low-hanging fruit. So the most vulnerable target, not necessarily the most valuable target. So don't think they won't find you because you're a small business. Compared to the big ones we hear about in the news, you are very much on the radar for these criminals to find and attack. So claims causes. What causes a cyber claim when we look at the intricacies of how it started? So we talked about ransomware as an attack. So this is the systems being encrypted by a criminal where they demand some money from you to release the system back. How does it start? Well, most often, it starts with an employee clicking on a malicious link within a seemingly genuine email. And that allows the criminal onto your system to look around, see what data is there, and then to eventually install their program, their malicious program, the ransomware program. And they will sit in your system for weeks or months, watching and waiting for the right time to strike, moving around and getting those administrator privileges to allow them to be most effective in their attack when they decide to hit the button. The CEO of Friday fraud I talked about, so funds transfer fraud as it's sometimes called. How does that begin? Well, it's usually an accounts person receiving a seemingly genuine email, again, from the boss or a known customer late on a Friday with some urgency on it, some urgency attached to it, requesting payment of an invoice. And it is normally along the lines of, hello, it's your CEO. You're the accounts person. I'm about to board a plane. I can't speak right now, but I need you to make an urgent payment before you leave the office on Friday. And I'll speak to you about it on Monday. But whatever you do, make the payment before you leave the office. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. And if that email gets to the right person, or there's not a procedure in place to review payments or have direct confirmation, then potentially you're going to fall victim to that kind of CEO or Friday fraud. Not using virtual private networks or multi-factor authentication for remote access. This allows criminals onto your system via a brute force attack. And we'll look at password strength on a future slide here. But simple passwords are not strong enough. We need to have that multi-factor authentication, that second token or second password that is normally locked to your personal device, your mobile phone, where you use your thumbprint or a password to say, give me that one-time code that I can use as a second validation that it is me genuinely logging into the system. And the virtual private networks are what encrypts your traffic. They hide your traffic when logging in remotely. So we should be using a VPN wherever possible. Just as bad as not having VPNs or MFA use remote access is leaving systems unpatched. So when we talk about patching, we're talking about those updates that come through once every 14 days, once a week, or once a month. It's really important those patches are installed as soon as possible, because a lot of the time those patches are to, yes, fix any bugs or improve performance of those softwares, but actually a lot of it is to try and introduce security fixes, particularly for those zero-day vulnerabilities we've talked about at the beginning, where we've become aware of a risk inherent in the software we didn't know before, and we now need to fix it as quickly as possible. And by not patching on time, you're leaving that vulnerability in your system that criminals can simply walk through the door and get access. Dependent business interruption loss we talked about earlier. It's that third-party service provider going down unexpectedly that you are dependent on, which allows you to trade. If they go offline, you can't trade. It's not your fault. Your systems aren't impacted. You haven't been attacked yourselves, but you can't trade. You're losing your ability to make money and make sales. Okay, just want to pause for a second so I can have a sip of coffee. Give you 5 seconds to have a look at these 2 points here. So let's pretend you've received an email from me. I'm Dean Conway. Can you spot the difference in these 2 email addresses? Just take 5 seconds. So this talks to phishing risks. And I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop there because it's an unfair question, because you can see no visible difference. But actually, the A's in the second one are using the Cyrillic alphabet, so the Russian-Ukrainian alphabet. It's not an A that we would use in English, and that can be enough, or some use of that can be enough to make an email look genuine. So if I, as a criminal, can create a fake email using the Cyrillic alphabet, I can pretend to be a genuine person, and if it looks genuine, you're more likely to click on it. So just looking at email addresses isn't enough to spot phishing emails. We've got to have other things in place. Does the tone of the email look right? Were we expecting it? You know, is it a trusted type of attachment? Have these moments to pause and reflect and look back for a second about whether it's something you should be clicking on without some thought, because that's what they rely upon, these criminals, that just click immediately with no thought behind it. So next pause for you. We're going to look at password strengths. So when we think about multi-factor authentication, which we just touched on, if that's not in place for remote access to systems or to log into your emails or your cloud storage backups, or some form of administrator privileged area, we're only using a password. And passwords can vary dramatically in how strong they are against attacks. So we talk about a brute force attack. So very simply, a brute force attack is a computer program that these criminals will deploy that is loaded up with a dictionary of common passphrases, passwords, and then dictionary terms ultimately, so they can guess through thousands of passwords a second until they guess the right one. So if we think about just having a password and a brute force attack coming in, how long would password.1 last? I won't ask you to comment in the chat, but just have a think. Password.1, is that a good password? Is that a bad password? How long would it last? Well, against a brute force attack, that password could last 0.04 seconds. So really, we don't want to be using passwords like that. There's no point having one at all. So if you're going to use a password, let it not be password.1. These criminals know password and iterations of that is very commonly used and is very weak. So let's say we're a better employee, we're a smarter employee. We're going to use password.1234 and an exclamation point. So it's a longer password and it's now got special characters in there. How long is that going to last against a brute force attack? Have we gone up a lot more? No, we're at 0.15 seconds. So we're still less than 1 second of protection against a brute force attack. So it's really important we are enforcing password policies and implementing multi-factor authentication where possible. So I work for Ardonna. Ardonna is the parent company of Towergate and Ethos and Bravo branches. So I've used Ardonna as my password, and I've put in a 0 instead of an O, and I've put in an @ symbol instead of an A, and I've included .1. So how strong is that password? Well, we're at 6 months. That's quite good. So it's much stronger. It's fairly unique in the grand scheme of things. So a criminal in Russia or Ukraine or Iran or Korea wouldn't have any awareness of Ardonna. And if they were just trying to guess passwords, that'd take them a long time to get to. So about 6 months. So quite a good, strong password, especially if we're looking to change passwords, once every 30 days or 60 days. The National Cybersecurity Centre for the UK suggests that 3 random words might be a good way to set passwords. It's quite long, it's quite random, and it's unique in theory. So house.chicken.red is the example I've used as a password with 3 random words. How long is that going to last against a brute force attack? Well, we're now at 2 years. So it does show that a longer, more random password is better. It's a much stronger password, fairly easy to remember, and maybe not when you've got 30 of them to remember in personal life and business life, but it shows the strength of having a longer, more complex random password. Now, this last one at the bottom, I don't expect that any individual will come up with a password like this themselves. It's just not possible. What this is talking to is a password manager tool, which a business would subscribe to say, we want our staff to have access to this tool. The tool will create long, unique, complex passwords which are stored in a safe and encrypted manner, which you then log into with a password and a biometric, potentially a thumbprint or a face scan or a multi-factor authentication code, and it creates these passwords for you. So that bottom one there, if we compare it to house.chicken.red, which was 2 years, how long do we think that's going to last? Is it now 3 years, 4 years, 10 maybe? Actually, 30 trillion years. So really, the message here is if we're using a password like that, by implementing a password manager tool, it's not going to get cracked. The brute force attacks would never guess that password. So really, we should be trying to use password manager tools if we can. There are free versions available for the public. So you can Google best free password manager tool and do some research, find your own. But really, as a business, if we could get businesses using password manager tools, you'd be much more secure from brute force attacks. But the message here really is, look, even if you're going to use the likes of the Ardonna.1, house.chicken.red type password, if you add MFA into your security solution in all areas, so remote access, emails, backups, and key customer data records on key systems, you're going to be in a much stronger position. So they can guess that password quite quickly. But if they're hit with that screen saying, give us your MFA token, it takes a lot longer to get around that as well. There are ways around it, but it's a layer of protection that the lower end criminal may just think, do you know what? I'm going to move on to the next potential target who might not be using MFA because it's more effort than it's worth. So we are, again, looking for low-hanging fruit, the easy victim. If you want to test your own passwords, passwordmonster.com is the website I've used for that. That calculates how long passwords will survive. Have a play around. You can look at formats of password or old passwords that you used to use potentially and see how strong they were. And you can have a play and have a look. So moving on to myth busting. So myth busting is really here to say we hear from customers and IT people certain objections to insurance or certain beliefs about insurance. And I just want to break through a few of those and give you a flavor as to why they might not be quite correct. So cyber insurance is not worth the money. We hear quite often, or it's too expensive. Well, we look at the ONS, Office for National Statistics data, the government data, about cyber events and cyber attacks. And they tell us that statistically, you are 9 times more likely as a business to suffer a cyber event than a property loss. So we're really focused on that fire insurance, even though we've potentially got fire extinguishers and sprinklers installed. But we buy the fire insurance, but we're ignoring the biggest risk to the business in terms of the numbers. And this comes from, like I said, the ONS. So we have to give it some weight. And generally, cyber events are going to be immediately costly. So we look at an attempted break-in on your property, and they might damage a window or a door, and we'll have a claim for £1,000. Whereas with cyber insurance, a cyber event, if you need help from a response team or a forensics investigator, you are quite readily looking at £20,000, £30,000, £40,000 within the space of a week. That's quite a realistic number. We see it on a regular basis. If you don't have access to those funds, then insurance is certainly a solution you should be thinking about. You have, as businesses, financial obligations that will be enforced by the ICO for credit monitoring, ID monitoring, and notification, whether or not you have insurance. They're going to require that you do that under law. And if you haven't got a plan, potentially that's going to be a problem for you as a business. I don't have a need on too small is often a thought of the smaller businesses. The reality is that 96% of attacks are directed to that SME market space because, again, systems usually aren't financed the same way a corporate business is. We don't have the resources or the technology in place to offer that protection. The majority of cyber attacks begin as an automated process. So these criminals aren't going through the yellow pages saying, I'll try this business, next business, next business. They are sending out programs into the internet to say, go and find me a potential victim. And then that will come back and tell them, I found 10, and they will try and attack those 10 businesses. We've got an IT team from Protected, may not have the appropriate expertise to respond to a cyber event is the reality. Very, very good, I am sure, at the day-to-day, and they will do a specific set of functions and jobs for you, but they may not be experienced in ransomware attacks or cyber outages or rebuilding databases. They might have the experience, but not enough resources to do that while still doing the day-to-day. And it's a multi-skilled response that's required. So if they can get you through the cyber event, they're not legal experts. They may never have dealt with the regulator. They've never done PR or crisis communication. So it's a multi-skilled response that is required. Good insurers have immediate access to these experienced resources for you, including legal experts and cyber forensics teams. They have an understanding as to how individual criminal groups operate. So they can tell you, if we take X action or Y action, we'll recover much faster. So you're buying into experience. And a robust policy will provide those proactive benefits we talked about to support your IT team, not replace them. If you outsource your IT, very similar to the message above, if you use the right IT provider, managed service provider, you are mitigating some risk because you are outsourcing and buying in skills you don't have in-house. But if a loss occurs despite their best efforts, they're not going to pick up the pieces. They're not there as a response manager. They can't cover your business interruption loss or your loss of profits. And increasingly, we see that managed service providers are targeted by criminals because they hold the keys into many businesses. So if I can attack one successfully, I can attack 30 potentially or more. It's quite a realistic thing. And there's always that risk, the ever-present risk of human error causing or contributing to a loss. So no matter what internal or external IT put in place, somebody will make a mistake, click on a link, download a file, share something they shouldn't share. That will cause a problem. Everything's on the cloud. Well, that's online 24 hours a day, can be attacked at any time. Usually facilitated by a third party, so you don't do cloud services yourself. Again, what happens if they go offline unexpectedly? You are reliant upon them to be there for you at all times. And if you've never been attacked before, does that mean it won't happen? No. How do you know you've never been hacked before? It could be happening now. We have seen examples of criminals being present in a system for 2 years before making their attack. So they got in early when the business was a startup, looked around, no data, no money. Let's leave our foot in the door and we'll come back. And it took 2 years before they decided it was the right time to attack. And the criminals only need to succeed once. We've got to defend 365 days a year. And again, that risk of managed service providers or other third-party service providers going down, which means you suffer an event, even though you have never been attacked before, never been hacked before. So in summary here, I think we're doing okay for time. Protection against a cyber event, a cyber outage, is far more than having good IT. There's just too much for your IT team to provide and to look after. And there are things like zero-day vulnerabilities that have no real defense because we don't know about them until they have been found and highlighted by the criminals. A multi-skilled response is required. It's not just having a good IT team or IT provider in your corner. You're going to need lots of external resources, which are very, very expensive and is also very time-consuming. People are your weakest link in business. Criminals know this, and good IT cannot prevent all human error risks. Zero-day vulnerabilities cannot be protected against as they're unknown, which we talked about. And insurance is there to provide support when needed, covering the costs of dealing with a cyber event and providing those resources, helping to secure, hopefully, successful recovery in the longer term. So that's where we end here. So my name's Dean, and Richard's details is on there as well. If you wanted to email us with any questions or queries, you can drop them in the chat. I've got a few claims examples after this slide, but I'll let Kate tell me if we've got time. Are there any questions in the chat at the moment, Kate, or not? Are you still there? I can see you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, I was just looking in the chat. No, we don't have any questions that I can see. But if anyone has any, then speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, feel free to drop them in the chat or speak up if you want to speak up. Obviously, noting we are recording the session. I said we can always email them through to myself or Richard, who will follow up with you directly. Yeah. But if there's no immediate questions, I think if we've got the hour, I'll use the hour and I'll move on to a couple of claims examples that we've actually seen, just to give you a few bits of understanding of how they might happen. So the first one is a phishing claim, a phishing situation. So a voice phishing scenario we saw in Manchester just last year. Started with a call from the bank, in inverted commas. This was a criminal pretending to be the bank. They spoke to the receptionist and said, there is a problem with your account. You need to take action, otherwise you're going to lose your money. So the receptionist said, well, I better transfer you to the finance director. So they did, and the finance director was driving home at the time, and basically spoke to this criminal, and the criminal said, I need you to get home, log on, and give us a call back. So this finance director did. They called back on the same number the criminal called from, which is the first problem. And essentially, through the conversation, the finance director gave the criminal remote access so that they could format the bank system so they wouldn't be attacked. And they took £95,000 out of the account just through voice phishing, a manipulation, adding that pressure, that high stress situation, which the finance director believed to be true because they were from, let's call it Santander. They banked with Santander. These criminals do their research, and it put that pressure on. You know, if you don't take action, you're going to lose your money. You must do it now. And we think we wouldn't fall foul of this, but you catch the wrong person or the right person at the right time, and you know they are well practiced in convincing people to do these things. There was a company, I think this was back end of 2023, CTS Managed Systems or Managed Solutions, and they were an external IT supplier to conveyancing solicitors. They were a managed service provider providing this customer relationship system to conveyancing solicitors. They were attacked in early November 2023. Their systems were locked down and encrypted. They didn't recover until late in December. I think it might actually have been Christmas Eve in December. So offline for a month. And it meant that 80 to 100 conveyancing solicitors could not trade for that period. Obviously, CTS couldn't provide financial compensation to all of those solicitors. It's obviously lots of money, lots of data. And if they didn't have their own insurances, those conveyancing solicitors suffered quite heavy financial impacts from that outage, unless they had lots and lots of paper records to hand and an efficient process to work from. They were going to suffer for that month-long period. And if you can think about the knock-on effect, it's a long period to catch up as well. So it's not just that 1 month of outage. This one is scary. This was a UK engineering firm with international presence, where their finance director was based out of Hong Kong. They get an email early in the week, I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday, saying, hi, it's such a body within the business. We have a big payment coming up for the end of the week. Just giving you a heads up. It's important. It's big. We need to be ready for it when it happens. They got a follow-up email middle of the week, Wednesday or Thursday, saying, just as a reminder, we've got a big payment coming up on the weekend. Be ready to make the payment. At this point, this financial controller out in Hong Kong is getting a bit suspicious. But then on Friday, they get an invitation to a Teams meeting. And that Teams meeting, when they join it, appears to be legitimate. Their CEO is on the phone call. There are colleagues present on the phone call that the finance controller recognizes. And they have a meeting about the business. And then when the phone call ends, the finance controller receives an email follow-up saying, thank you for joining the meeting. I saw you there. Here's the details of that payment we need to make. And I think it was $25 million that needed to be made. So having that reassurance of the Teams call, the financial controller made the payment on the Friday. And then come Monday morning, it was realized that it was a fake payment. The emails were phishing emails, they were fake emails. The whole Teams call was fake. It was an AI generated phone call. So the faces, the voices, they were all fake and pre-recorded using AI technology. So very, very convincing. Large sum of money was taken. Quite a scary scenario to find yourselves in. Quite hard to defend against as well. I think this is the last one I've put on here. So this is MGM Grand and Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. Again, I think this talks to July of 2023. September 2023 or July 2023 was the period. Both of these casino and hotel resorts were hit with ransomware at the same time, roughly. Caesars Palace was asked for a ransom, I think initially of about $30 million, but eventually we believe they paid about $18 million to the criminals. And they were back up in line, working fairly quickly, so much so that we didn't really hear anything about it. And MGM Grand were hit at the same time, asked for $20 million. But MGM Grand said, no, we don't pay ransoms. We don't deal with criminals. We're just going to ignore you and seek an alternative method of recovery. What that meant is that they were offline for a much longer period of time. And the attack was quite severe. It left them unable to check guests in and out because it's all computer controlled. The elevators didn't work. The valet parking didn't work. The billboards outside weren't working. And the casino was largely redundant. They couldn't pay out prizes and awards because it's all digital, and slot machines were turned off because they were controlled by a computer system. They were offline for a much longer period of time, and the last number I heard as a consequence was about $100 million. So for the likes of MGM Grand, that might be okay. They'll recover from that, but it paints a picture of how different the outcome can be depending on how you approach your recovery. And that's not to say you should pay these ransoms. The UK government advice is don't pay ransoms, but you can see how different of an outcome you might have depending on how you go about recovering. And the ultimate message is have the resources in your corner to go down any path you choose, with the financial safety net to get you through that process. So yeah, good insurance really is key there. And that is the last slide. Finally, we've come in 3 minutes under. Kate, I'll pass back to you if you've got any questions, or we'll close it and we'll allow people to email in any queries they may have.